guys Today we are going to discuss about the ways of assigning constraints a name. So there are two ways of creating any constraint. One is you just create a constraint without giving it a name by yourself, so that constraint will get an automatic name from the server or from the Oracle engine, and that is called a system generated name for that particular constraint. Another way is to assign any constraint a name, and that name will be given by the user specifically. So the user is going to enter the name for that particular constraint who is creating, who's created by the user. So let's create a table, and let me show you. I'm going to create a table with which will be a teacher table, and that table will have an attribute, a TID or teacher ID, and that teacher ID will be a primary key, and primary key constraint will be without giving it a name. So the name will be given to that constraint, will that name will be given to that constraint by the Oracle engine. So to create a table, I have used create command, create table teachers, and this is the first attribute of this table. Teacher ID is the first attribute, and the size of this attribute is 3, and data type is number. And I'm creating this teacher ID as primary key at applying this primary key attribute to this teacher ID. Another attribute in this table is teacher name, teacher underscore name, and this attribute has data type varchar, and the size of this attribute is 30. Phone number is another attribute, and the size is 11, and another attribute is address, and the size is 50, and data type is varchar. So this table will be created, and this teacher ID will become the primary key, and primary key constraint will be applied on this teacher ID column. But let's execute it and create this table. Now see, this table is created, and if you want to check what is the name of this constraint, automatic name which was assigned to this constraint, what is that particular name? To see that, you need to use select command, and you need to write select constraint underscore name comma constraint underscore type. And if you want to see the table name also, then just write constraint underscore table underscore name. So I'm not going to see the table name, rather I'm going to see the constraint which are applied on the teachers table. So I'll use from user underscore constraints, where table name, so specifically selecting the teachers table, teachers name, teachers table underscore name is teachers, which will be written in the capital letters. So if I execute this command by selecting it, when I run it, teachers, there was a spell mistake. So let's run it again. So if you run this command, you will see user underscore constraints. Sorry. Now if you execute this, you see this table teachers, I have mentioned over here where table name equals to teachers. So that means I want to see the constraint name from teachers table. So the teachers table has a constraint, and the constraint name is sys C007057. So this is automatic generated name by the Oracle engine, and it has given it a name, and this is the particular name for the primary key constraint. And this P shows that is the primary key constraint which is applied on the teacher ID column. So now this is name assigned by the Oracle engine, and this is the automatic name. And if you want to assign or create an attribute with user created name or user generated name for a specific attribute for particular constraint, you can also do that by changing this command a little bit. So first of all, let's delete this constraint from this table, and then recreate this table with user generated constraint name. So let's delete this constraint. To delete the constraint from this table, which is the primary key constraint, you need to use alter command, alter table, and then table name. So table name is teachers, and then you need to drop constraint. See, constraint, and then the constraint name. So this is the constraint name, just copying it and we'll paste over here. So the command is alter table teachers drop constraint. That means you want to delete constraint. Drop constraint means you want to delete it, and just write the name of the constraint, and this particular constraint will be deleted. And this attribute is no longer a primary key now. So the current state of this, if you want to check whether this constraint is deleted or not, just use describe keyword to see the schema of this table. Okay, so just run it. Now you will see this is not a primary key now. Okay, so teacher ID is not a primary key because there is not one placed over here. So if this was a primary key, there would be one over here. So that one shows that this teacher ID column is selected as primary key. So now this attribute is not a primary key, and now I want to create this table, or I want to make create another table where I will make this teacher ID column as primary key column, and I will give that particular constraint as a name. So let's create a table teachers one, because this teachers table is already available. Either you can delete this table and then recreate it, or you can create another table with new name. So let's create a new table with new name, and the new name is teachers one, and then teacher ID is the first column. Number is the data types, 3 is the size, and now giving it a name. So the name of this constraint is, for example, teachers or teacher underscore ID underscore PK. Okay, so I have given it a name, teacher underscore ID underscore PK, and to make this constraint, I have to write word constraint over here. So now there is a little change of while creating table, there is a little change in the writing of this query. That change is, you need to mention the column name, then its data type and size, then third will be keyword constraint, then you need to write the name of the constraint, which you can use any name if you like, whatever you like, and then the word primary key. So now the Oracle engine is going to create this table, going to have this teachers one table will have teachers ID as a primary key, and that primary key will have the name teachers underscore ID underscore PK. And why you use constraint names? Because later on, if you want to delete these constraints, you want to disable these constraints, then you can use these names to apply those changes on that particular constraint. Therefore, it is good to keep some names, and that these names which user provide will be easy to remember. And if the names which are provided by the system may have difficulty to remember, however, both of the ways are useful, and you can use any of the method. So let's run it. Now the table is created, and this constraint is created, which has name teacher underscore ID underscore PK. Now let's check if this constraint is created. To check it again, I'm going to execute same query which was written earlier. Select constraint underscore name comma constraint underscore type from user underscore constraint where table name equals to teachers. So if you execute it, you'll find out. So there is no constraint available in the teachers table, which I've just created, then change the name as teacher one. So I'll now write teacher one in the where class as a table name equals to teachers one. So now if you run this command, you'll see this is the constraint name which I just provided over here, and the constraint type is P. P means primary key. So primary key is teacher's ID, and the constraint name is teacher underscore ID underscore PK, and type is P, which means primary key. So if you want to delete this constraint, you can use this command alter table teachers drop constraint, and then you can use this name teachers underscore ID underscore PK to delete this particular constraint. So hope it's clear. There are two ways of creating constraint. One is by giving it a system name, and another is giving it by giving it a username, a user given name, which is whatever is easy for you, you can use any of the ways. So if you have any questions, please post your question in the comment section. I'll answer. Thank you.